Good morning, friends. Welcome to the Immanuel 10 at 10. Happy Easter. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. My folks were here from Tennessee for Easter Sunday. We had some beautiful weather. Couldn't imagine a more beautiful Easter Sunday. And now we're getting some much needed rain. Everything is turning gorgeously green. So get out there and enjoy it. This week in our 1 year chronological Bible reading plan, we finished the book of Judges and read through the book of Ruth, and we're just starting 1 Samuel. As I mentioned last week, Judges describes what happened as the Israelites settled into the promised land. They did not drive out all the Canaanites as they were supposed to do. Instead, they started intermarrying with them and adopting their practices of immorality and worshiping other gods. Whenever they did so, God let them experience the consequences of their actions. They were harassed and oppressed by their neighbors. When the Israelites came to their senses, they cried out to God, and He delivered them with judges. These were not courtroom judges, but military heroes who defeated Israel's enemies and ushered in a temporary time of peace. As long as the judge lived, the people obeyed God, but when he or she died, the people fell into idolatry and sin again. The cycle gradually spiraled out of control. Even the judges got progressively worse. Uh, the book highlights 6 judges during this time and shows their increasing corruption. They started off fairly well, like Othniel and Ehud and Deborah, but they became gradually worse. Gideon, Jephthah, and Samson. Gideon tested God, punished his own people, and eventually made an idol that people worshipped. Jephthah made a rash vow, showing that he didn't know God's character, and ended up sacrificing his own daughter. Samson was promiscuous, violent, and arrogant. The Bible says that each of these judges were filled with the Spirit of God, which enabled them to deliver their people. But that doesn't mean that God condoned their sinful actions. This weekend's study from the Bible Project, When We Walk Away from God, asks the question, what happens when Israel forgets their God? The book of Judges shows Israel's tragic downward spiral. It's a sobering examination of the human condition that highlights our need for a deliverer. The book ends with 2 very disturbing stories that show how incredibly lawless the people have become. A private army raids a temple and burns a village to the ground. Sexual abuse and violence leads to civil war. The final verse of the book says, "In those days Israel had no king, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes." The only hope for Israel was a king who could unite the people and bring them out of their cycle of corruption. That story begins in the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel. The Bible Project describes the book of Ruth as a beautifully crafted look at how God's good purpose interplays with human decisions. It's a tale of love and loss, faithfulness and redemption. God uses a faithful non-Israelite to bring restoration to his people. Picking up in the days when the judges ruled, the book of Ruth tells the story of Naomi, the Moabite widow Ruth, and the farmer Boaz. Naomi and her family go to Moab during a time of famine. Her sons marry Moabite women, but they and their father die in Moab. Naomi counsels her daughters-in-law to leave, but Ruth shows loyalty to Naomi. They go back to Bethlehem, her hometown, together. In need of food, Ruth gleans barley from the field of a man named Boaz, who turns out to be Naomi's family redeemer. This is a person who would marry a widow in order to preserve the family line. Naomi and Ruth hatch a plan to get Boaz to notice Ruth. Going to Boaz, Ruth asks her to redeem the family and marry her. Boaz notices Ruth's noble character and agrees. Ruth and Naomi celebrate. So the book really shows how Ruth's act of loyalty and Boaz marries Ruth in the presence of the city elders. Their marriage produces joy and birth, becoming the lineage of King David, from whom the Messiah would come. The book ends with a genealogy showing how Ruth, this Moabite widow, became the great grandmother of King David. Curiously, God is hardly mentioned in the book of Ruth. At a time when we are looking for God to be active through a judge or a king, God instead works out his will through the everyday faithfulness of his people. And this faithfulness not only benefits Naomi and her family, but goes on to bless the world through the family of David, the line from which the Messiah would eventually come. Well, next week we'll continue our our journey into the story of Samuel, which eventually leads to King Saul and then King David. Hope to see you this Sunday for worship at 8:30 and 10:45 with Sunday school and adult education at 9:45. All of our worship services, of course, are also available online. So have a great weekend.